and today is the 10th of November, 7+ months since the first lockdown started and the second one we're now in. I put it in inverted commas because round my way, motor vehicle traffic doesn't seem to have changed at all. Here are, on this front slide, you've got all the various links to go to previous editions and previous slides. News from this week, myself and Brian have been interviewed for a our special award coming up soon. I don't know if it's embargoed or not. If we can put down award-winning in front of everything that we do. Okay, so that's the address. Various people are sending me bits and pieces. That's nice. Okay, so the theme for today is again on what do we do now about emergency active travel funding, second tranche, where are we now, what's happening? Sorry, let's just go in there, yes. Got a few new bits and pieces to read, some consultations, developments in last week in the UK and London, and the weekly rolling slides. So this is the big decision. Continuing towards climate collapse or lose a few parking spaces. Right, now, this is a parliamentary question from Selene Saxby of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Cycling and Walking. What assessment has he made, that's the Minister, Chris Heaton-Harris, has made of the effectiveness of walking, cycling and local traffic reduction schemes delivered under Tranche 1 of the Emergency Active Travel Fund, and what progress has he made in distributing Tranche 2 funding? So his answer is there'll be a full evaluation in due course, which will inform decisions on the next programs. Local authorities who receive funding were required to complete an evaluation survey, and we're going to confirm Tranche 2 allocations shortly. Shortly is the word now. Once it is satisfied the funding will support schemes which are properly thought out and, note the bit in yellow highlight, which will deliver benefits to all road users. So a lot of people have jumped on that and said, what's this all road users? We're used to that being code for this mustn't upset what motorists of various kinds happen to feel is their basic human rights to do whatever they feel like. So we're all a bit worried about that, that there may be a pullback on exactly what is going to be awarded when the award comes, and we don't know when that's going to come. Right, here is something on Twitter, which I did. I got a lot of likes for this, and it refers to Rupert Hook MP, the MP for Ealing, who has been opposing a low traffic neighbourhood in her constituency put in by the Labour Council, and she referred in there to saying that a couple of her constituents had a bollard put in, and so they are now penned in like animals. And she referred to the fact there's been vandalism, so therefore this means there's no consensus and they're wrong. So I asked her, how are you going to reduce motor traffic levels? And she hasn't replied. Well, there you go. Now this is actually quite nice. Do have a read of the missive from Kent Road Safety. And I actually like seeing this victim blaming garbage because there are so many people now who pile in and oppose this sort of nonsense. I pointed out, for example, also that using a bicycle is often for exercise. You don't, we're entitled to use bicycles apart from essential journeys. There seem to be a lot of motorists around who are using cars not for essential journeys. Maybe talk to them. And they've added on to the appropriate clothing and helmet, of course, footwear. I've never seen this before. There has never been any study in any of the hundreds of thousands of bits and pieces on road safety that suggests that footwear on a bicycle leads to you being hospitalized. Although I have heard of a person who cut her toes because she was wearing flip-flops and put her foot down too quickly. And this need to reduce the strain on the NHS really annoys me. But like I say, it's good to see people piling in. Oh yes, some scum. This refers to the Farage scumminess, which I don't want to actually go on about because on Twitter, various people were saying, why should we report, why should we reply to him, give him the oxygen of publicity? Carlton Reid did, and he then said, maybe I shouldn't have done. And I had a thread where I said, look, it's not just scum like him. I used the word scum quite a lot. But there are a lot of people who feed into stuff like the road tax and its cyclist braking laws and so on and so on. And I said, we need to debunk the various myths around cycling. And I tagged a lot of road safety organizations and said, don't you think you should be doing this? I've been saying this for about 30 years. And again, as with Ms. Huck, nobody has taken me up on this. So I do think we need to fight this bigotry, and I do think that various professionals, sometimes people like the old West Midlands police people would do that, but it needs to happen. It needs to happen on social media and everywhere. We're now on the various new bits and pieces that have come out in the press. The suggestion in an international survey reported in The Guardian, also in an RAC survey, that motorists are going to be more attached to their cars as we come out of COVID. They've got used to them because they're not using public transport. And incidentally, I do think that there has been something of a failure of government in this area. We've been running these, webinars for, and I've been presenting since the first lockdown, and not enough has been done for active travel. And that's something where we need to blame the people in charge, with, of course, the exceptions who've been putting in good stuff. Okay, now there's now an all-party parliamentary group, Fair Fuel for Motorists and Hauliers, who've been whinging away as they do. Howard Cox, people like that, the Alliance of British Drivers, and only 14 MPs wrote to the minister saying that cycle lanes and low traffic neighbourhoods should be taken out. Someone rather wittily said, let's have a look at their diversity. And there they are, all seem to be white men in the Conservative Party, with a few other people like Looney, Ledenbit, Obick. There is an important point here because they're funded by the Road Haulage Association. And I have suggested that in procurement processes for various services involving freight, local authorities could actually downgrade those people submitting tenders who are members of the Road Haulage Association. This could be done legally, and there would be challenges to it, but it might allow us to have a good old pop at the Road Haulage Association, because truckers aren't actually that popular with the general public. So I think since they've decided to pick a fight with us, we should perhaps consider opposing them. There's an awful lot about what's good and what's good for cycling and walking. I think we need to talk about the bad stuff, you know, how to deal with the problems from road haulage and car culture generally. I've just put up this link. It was about the petition to Parliament asking to get rid of low traffic neighbourhoods, etc. And this is the response from the Department for Transport, which you can always refer to as the official government response. So there's the link. Yes, I mentioned this last week. This is from Cycling UK, you know, about how we have to deal with traffic congestion as we come out of lockdown, and the need to support active travel. That's another link from last week. As was that, Ron Newman. This is new. It's the Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation response to the government's planning for the future. I don't know if the consultation's ended yet, but do go to that link to see what they say, because it's actually quite good. There is a petition from London doctors and nurses asking Sadiq Khan to have more low traffic neighbourhoods and cycle lanes, etc. And they like them. I put this in before the Trump election because the important thing about Trump going is that if the United States re-signs the Paris Accord, then humanity does have something of a chance, which it wouldn't have done if Trump had got in. Now, here's an interesting bit from Scott Urban, where he says, I've estimated a model that seems to indicate each year in a low traffic neighborhood is associated with a 3% reduction in car ownership relative to non-LTNs in London, controlling for population, land area, house prices, and other items. I haven't read the stuff, and it's all modeling stuff, but it could be a useful bit of research, useful bit of ammunition on the benefits of low traffic neighborhoods. Diversity page, nothing. Oh yeah, Lucy Master and Tausig of Road Danger Reduction Forum Committee. She was shortlisted for an Active Travel Academy award on her thing about how we should plan school streets, etc., for secondary school children as well as primary school children. And I'm afraid we still seem to be at 70% male, 30% female on Ideas with Beers. I'll do another count later. Right, the delay slide. It's now 7 months plus. What has happened where you are or is very shortly about to? And I come back to Alex's tweet. 80% of the government's announced £225 million for walking and cycling is still just a number. When is it coming? And this is the 10th time for Alex's tweet. It was going to be early September. Now, as we said from what I was referring to in the message from Mr. Heaton Harris, it's shortly. And I mentioned Get Pedaling before. Haven't heard anything more about that. Let us know if anybody does hear about it, whatever it is. Again, raised the issue about campaigning over where Emergency Active Travel Fund Tranche 2 is, but people are saying, yeah, it really, really is imminent now. It really is shortly. But couldn't hurt to put a bit of pressure on your local MP, particularly if they're Conservative MPs, just to say that, you know, you really do like low traffic neighborhoods, etc., etc. You want more. Point out that when we come out of lockdown, there'll be more cars about, and that, of course, at the moment, people need to cycle for health, etc. So where are we on the ground? As usual, it all depends where you live. Okay, West Sussex. This is very disappointing. The government-funded temporary cycleways are set to be removed. And what West Sussex say is the schemes fulfilled their main objective of offering people dedicated space to cycle rather than using public transport or to leave the car at home and use their bike instead. This was in response to a unique set of circumstances during the first national lockdown. The extraordinary environment that led to their installation no longer exists, even though we are about to enter into a new national lockdown. And I put an exclamation mark there because what is that supposed to mean? Because the whole point is that as we come out of lockdowns, you're going to need the facility to walk and cycle in safety more, because there will be lots of cars about. So they have completely missed the point, and that's very bad. And it's very bad because here's some news. The numbers of cyclists per week utilised in this part of the scheme has increased from 800 cycle movements per week to a peak of 2,000. And this is the report on Shoreham cycle lanes. They're the people who had a website up with pictures of people cycling and giving each one something to say about how much they like them. And Mark Treasure says, what's absolutely shocking about West Sussex's decision to immediately remove every single one of the pop-up schemes in the county is they're also removing ones that are a proven success and have negligible impacts on motor traffic. So bad, bad, bad West Sussex. Sefton, there's a new scheme being consulted on, which I was just sent a link on about an hour and a half ago. Southport, I think that is. In Leeds, I showed a picture of the low traffic neighbourhoods which are starting to go in for areas of Leeds. Road open signs were in from the start, but vandalism has already started, according to Paul Blurton. Nottingham, I picked up on this, sent to me by Jill Moore. Tomorrow works begin at Colwick Country Park on resurfacing the stretch of footpath between the two lakes. I'm quite sure the footpath between the two lakes needs resurfacing, but it says works, this is my emphasis, works are being funded as part of the Emergency Active Travel Fund. Well, that's actually not what it was supposed to be for. So when Active Travel England ever comes to light, which I hope it will, I hope they jump on cases like that where the funding has been used for something other than radical road space reallocation. In London, yeah, I mentioned last week the deal done between government and TfL. There's still some rumblings going on about how the details shouldn't have been released to the press and stuff like that. But so there's still a bit of grumbling going on. Now, Enfield. I've mentioned the Bowes low traffic neighbourhood before, and this has been sent to me. Real-time monitoring has shown that impacts on the North Circular Road have been minimal and have not required any significant changes to alter capacity. So good news there to fight back on. And this is quite a long piece from the head teacher at St Monica's in Enfield about the Fox Lane low traffic neighbourhood. And she talks about over the last year or so, we've seen great changes in our local area which fit neatly into what we teach the children about the environment. First of all, was a cycle lane, then there was a school street, local streets closed as part of a low traffic neighborhood. And she talks about and gives some figures on the increase in walking, increase in cycling, you know, all very small numbers because it's just one perspective. And she talks about how she's not using her car so much. So that's quite a nice little piece from a primary school head teacher in Enfield. Tower Hamlets, bad news. Motor traffic was restricted on parts of Brick Lane to aid social distancing and businesses to reopen safely. From today, Brick Lane is open to traffic, by which they mean motor traffic. So they've partly pulled back from what they'd done. And this does seem to be happening with people saying, oh, well, you know, we had it for a while, we don't need it anymore, because presumably people don't want to walk or cycle anymore. Royal Parks, Richmond Park, you know, has always been a battleground, and they did have restrictions on motor traffic, which were almost totally lifted recently. Royal Parks is a National Nature Reserve, site of special scientific interest, Grade 1 historic landscape, European Special Area Conservation, etc. And this is what it looks like now. This is from someone called Jack Fifield. I don't know if you remember when we were complaining about all the images of cyclists all being scrunched up and sort of so that it looked like they were a lot closer together than they actually are. I think that's been done here, but they deserve it because it is full of cars and it shouldn't be. The one exception being on Sawyer's Hill, which is a small part of Richmond Park, which looks like that. So it shows the demand is there and the problem is that. So Royal Parks, please don't have cars coming through some car parking for people who are just visiting. And there is, coincidentally, a consultation sent out by Royal Parks at the moment, which I'll refer to at the end of the presentation, and you know what to do. This is a nice bit of poppy stuff from Northcroft Road in Ealing in a low traffic neighbourhood. In Islington, traffic filters have gone in from yesterday for another low traffic neighbourhood. And in Lambeth, this was something which was publicised by Sarah. The number of women there has almost tripled. And Ealing, this is a screenshot, a nice little video of what's outside Fielding School in low traffic neighbourhood 21. And you can get in touch with Better Reading the Streets to keep on the pressure, keep writing to the good guys, to the councillors, saying, you know, don't back off, stay in there, you've got support. So here's the reading stuff. Don't forget our webinar recordings from the RDRF Road Peace webinar. There was a consultation for the Active Travel Academy's stuff on language around road crashes and cycling, which is even more relevant now after the Farage pile-in. Just some consultations which I think you should get into. There's a hit and run petition I've mentioned before. Not enough of you have either signed it or retweeted it or put it on Facebook. It's very important. Please go to that. The Royal Parks consultation you can get to from that link. Planning for the future, I think, is still open. Do take a look at that Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation. And you can also give feedback on the street space programs in London. That comes courtesy of Wheels for Wellbeing. So always a consultation or survey to fill in. And on advertising, HSBC sponsored British cycling for a few years, and this has been put up by people who say at HSBC we put 2.5 million per year into British cycling and sunk 13 billion pounds per year into fossil fuel projects. So there's a bit of subvertising for you. And that's it.
So I'm here to talk to you about a little kind of project which we've been working on, actually kind of pretty much since the start of lockdown, and it kind of what it's basically culminated in is kind of something which is called kind of the transport cookbook, which kind of which I want to kind of use to kind of prompt kind of a little bit of debate as to kind of whether or not, obviously this is kind of this is a good idea, whether or not it's kind of something which would be interested to everybody. But obviously I won't continue. So so as you probably can guessed, since lockdown started, the first lockdown started, there's been a heck of a lot of work which has been done on literally just tracking what's happened. Obviously you can you can see it every week, come here in Ideas for Beers, but there are all sorts of websites out there which track basically what's happened. So, and there's things like Space to Move, there's Tactical Space, COVID Mobility Works. These are just 3 which I use, and all of them do kind of a really good job in trying to understand and trying to collate what is happening kind of across the world as transport and mobility has kind of reacted to the lockdown. And it's kind of fair to say that heck of a lot has actually happened. A lot of it obviously has been disappointing, but there is people are tracking kind of what's happened, and that is all work. So that's all well and good, and that's a great thing to do. But I'm a kind of also, like, my transport planning hat has always been on, well, okay, what sort of impact is this having? Not just an impact in terms of how people are getting around, but impact in terms of how transport policy can and does change for the better, and where there is good examples of how transport policy is basically changing as a result of these sorts of initiatives. What sort of lessons can we then learn from that, and then how can we share them really easily? So this is obviously kind of quite a complicated slide, but basically at the core of it is it's kind of like how I like to think of transport policy. So firstly, you can start up here, you set a vision, you set a vision for what your area wants to achieve. You then write a strategy to basically set out how you're going to achieve that vision. You then implement it. You then evaluate how well your implementations go. And then at some point in the future, you then say, okay, do we then need to start changing policy as we evaluate how well we've done? Now, of course, there are varying, I think it's fair to say that there are varying views on how effective this is in transport policy. But what's been really interesting during COVID is, as a result of the Emergency Act of Travel schemes and a lot of other schemes, a lot of people have actually gone straight into implementation. Let's just go out and do stuff. Lockdown's a really good opportunity in order to do things, to do quite radical things. And so let's just go straight to implement. There are a few people who obviously have gone to strategy. So looking at the likes of the guys in the West Midlands, in Southampton, who have put in things like their emergency transport plans, and they can put a bit of a thought process behind actually what they're doing. But a lot of them have gone to strategy. Have gone straight to implementation. And now we're beginning to evaluate what the impacts of those different schemes are. And as I said, that's kind of all well and good. But one thing which we're not very good at in transport is like going round this circle fundamentally. So we're basically in kind of quite, where I see it, we're in quite a strange position. We're in a kind of quite familiar position in that we've obviously kind of learnt a lot from the schemes which have actually been delivered, which have actually been evaluated, and we're not actually getting to kind of the change in policy, kind of changing visions and changing strategy. And we've really got to start actually learning lessons from that on basically how we try and actually complete this circle in kind of a robust manner. And of course, no doubt many of you actually have your own views on how and how not we do that. But then as practitioners, and I can say it as practitioners because it's not just been myself who's been thinking about this. So I've been supported in this work from 3 extremely able colleagues come from all over the world. So Amy Whitcroft from New Zealand Transport Agency, Jeremy Dalton from Method City in the US, and Carlos Pardo from Numo, who you may have heard of. Of course, there's all their Twitter handles here where you can follow them. And so we started thinking, well, okay, so transport, in a sense, we're kind of going around like a familiar circle, in that we're kind of not really starting to feed back what we're learning, and we're not really starting to make change. And so what sort of tools can we then put in place in order to make that change easier, in order to us be able to share best practice really well, and to be able to kind of make this sort of information freely accessible. So if people kind of want to understand what the impacts of different schemes have been, they want to use that to then start to change policy, then it's like just how on earth do we do this? And so that sets out how we do this. So kind of our idea is something called the Transport Cookbook, and it's a very long and boring story as to why we call it a Transport Cookbook, which will probably I'll probably take after the after my presentation. But basically our big plan is to create like an open source editable repository that documents changes that are taking place, setting out how it's changing policy, and also that anybody can contribute towards it at any time, because we can see like there's a real gap for this sort of understanding and gap for this sort of solution to to kind of basically come to help to what's the best way to describe it, help to make it easier to kind of start to make that transition, because certainly kind of a lot of knowledge and a lot of expertise, whilst it's obviously shared in forums like this, and it's kind of shared it's kind of shared in the kind of professional institutions, it's actually not shared much more widely. It's kind of not really kind of accessible. And of course, as much as I kind of hate to use this term, it would be great to just have everything in one place, wouldn't it? I won't come on to that. And so what we decided to do, well, okay, we could start to think about it, think about what it could look like, kind of high level visions and all that sort of thing. But if anybody who actually know me, I'm just a person who just does it. And so we just did it, basically. So what we've actually kind of created is a Transport Cookbook wiki. So obviously most of you will know wiki from Wikipedia, which is obviously kind of the online encyclopedia, but basically it's open source, editable resource where people can add their own content, they can edit content on pages. And so we thought, okay, well, based upon our initial research and doing some stuff in our own time, let's make a quick prototype of it. And obviously that's the link there. Go on, have a check out, see what it's like. Bear in mind it's a prototype, so it's far from being complete. So basically, we just want to see whether or not this sort of idea could work. We shared it with like a few friends, and they said, yeah, actually, this seems like an okay idea. It seems kind of quite interesting. So yeah, let's take it on from here. And they just asked, well, okay, what's next? And so this is kind of now what is next. So why we kind of really actually chose a wiki as opposed to kind of websites and other formal databases, which a lot of other people are, or massive guidance documents, which whilst it's great that a lot of them are publicly accessible, kind of reading a 200-page document when you're going to bed is probably not the best thing. So why did we choose a wiki? Actually, so we got some positive feedback on our idea from a kind of initial bunch of people who we spoke to. Again, it's a resource which is open and editable, so anybody can add content at any time. So expand the number of case studies, expand the best practice, but also then it's something which can be scalable easily. So one of the challenges which we've seen has been facing a lot of other resources is that it's really hard to scale them really well. And of course, with Wikipedia, so with things like we call MediaWiki, it's basically the software which powers Wikipedia. It can actually be scaled, scale quite easily, so long as obviously there's the people to add the content and be able to moderate the content. And so that's kind of why we've chosen this approach. So our idea now is to basically build upon this prototype and work with people, obviously yourselves included, to actually build this out a bit more. I'll be honest, even though I'll put in the slide here, it says how is it or will it be structured, what does it look like, all that sort of things. These are my ideas. The way which we're approaching actually building this blooming thing is very much iterative, very much organically, and very much led by people who wish to participate within it. And so in some senses, I don't really have an envision as to what it actually looks like, but this is just my ideas on what it could look like. So the idea being is that whilst there's 3 general things, which is on around policy changes, permanent changes, and tactical changes, underneath all of those, they will have different challenges. And basically, if you're somebody who wants to come on and you have a particular challenge relating to, let's say, a temporary change, so trying to maintain social distancing, for instance, you then go onto that page. You can go onto that page. It then lists a load of case studies. It lists loads of methods which you can use, and then you can click on them to find out much more and just how they're done, and obviously just then the practical examples of actually then doing this. And of course, it's all then underpinned by different methods used and different case studies used. And underneath each of them, it just goes into detail how this stuff was actually done, and what the impact was, and what's the steps which you went through to actually deliver these sorts of things on the ground. So, as I said, how we're actually doing it is very much an iterative process. It's very much you learning by doing. We're looking to start off more specifically on trying to understand start off on the temporary COVID-19 schemes that have or have not made the transition to permanent schemes, and on each page basically just setting out what's the summary, what methods are used, what are the methods, what other methods does the scheme mix with, what the impacts were, and then how it's helped to change policy from that. And then just over time, it's just then building up and building up and just building up a picture as to what sort of other interventions, other than just actually doing things, are actually influential in starting to change policy. And as I said, it's just starting to do this over time. How will we do it? So the initial idea at the moment is basically we just have a series of communities of practice across all different parts of the globe, basically reflecting the project team, who will just be adding content to the wiki. So you do with Wikipedia. It's just adding content, putting on case studies, putting on examples of how things were done. There will also need to be a team of content moderators who will agree with content guidelines and yada yada yada. It's basically it's similar to Wikipedia in terms of how it's all managed, but in order to basically take it to the next stage, and we need these, obviously, first of all, we need actually these 3 things, need a volunteer community, more content, and investment in, in a bit of background technology, which obviously we're quite happily doing. But also we just need an idea as to actually what would be useful and what is actually be relevant now, because whilst obviously we've come up with our own ideas based upon our own research and just based upon my own experience as well, ultimately I could be completely wrong, and you could just be sitting here looking at the screen thinking, James, that's just an absolutely crazy idea. What on earth are you on about? You should actually be doing this instead. And so that's kind of where, so yeah, that's obviously kind of what we're seeking as we then go through to the next phase, because basically, as I said, so the idea is that we'll focus upon transitions from trials into practice based upon policy in 3 countries, UK, Colombia. This kind of slide details it a little bit more, but it's just saying, identify what these case studies and use cases are, demonstrating the impact, identifying permanent changes that have then happened, and then documenting, how it's then mixed with other things to create a much bigger impact compared to if you just delivered schemes on their own. And again, it's just then about building up, collating together and building up that evidence base of not just what is happening, but actually what sort of impact is made and what's the stuff which actually really does have a big impact. And I realized for a lot of us, we kind of already know that, or we kind of already feel like instinctively we know that, but actually there's just kind of a power just having this evidence collated together in a single place, in a repository, which people can add to all the time. And so I said there's kind of a couple things there in terms of what can you do right now. So obviously, so we're looking over the next 4 or 5 months or so to actually start building this thing out, and basically we kind of need all the help which we can get. So if you're kind of willing to volunteer to to create content, or to potentially help coordinate a lot of other people who may be able to create content, that'll be absolutely amazing. But the most important thing which you can probably do right now is tell me whether or not it's a crazy idea. Tell us what needs improving, and tell us how this would then actually add value, or if it would actually add value. So, as I said, this is I understand this is Ideas with Beers. This is my idea. So, thank you all very much.
Well, yeah, no, cheers, James. I think it's absolutely brilliant idea, big idea of the day, and something that I've been looking for years. Like, I often have to go to countries to take pictures and try and find out what's happening, and hunt down the engineers at conferences and ask them, well, what was that like before? And why did you do that? And it's a complete nightmare, particularly across different languages. So for me, it's an absolute mind blower, particularly from the engineering side. I can get a hold of drawings and reasons and how they're performing. So at this stage, I'm going to open it up to people. I've got about 1 million questions, but I had an early conversation with them about this, so I'll throw it open to other people. Just come in, but if I've not got to you, put your name in the chat, and then I'll make sure I get to it in that order. So has anybody got any initial feedback apart from my, wow, what a great idea feedback? Anybody else want to come in? I've got a whole bunch of, come on, that's the best idea you've heard all week. Come on now. He's gonna jump in. I've noticed on the chat, lots of people have been showing support and gone, wow, this would be fantastic for stakeholders. Everybody's shy today. Claire, you're unmuted. What do you think about it?
I think that certainly the case studies, there's definitely, my background is sort of working in content, making websites for people, and always starting with what's the audience need. And certainly there's an audience need for somewhere where you can find good case studies. And but yeah, I think that might be what I'd suggest to James. It's sort of like there's a sort of logical need here, but who does he think the users are? And creating you can basically there's a technique where you can create some personas and sort of just test out will anyone use it, because sometimes these things seem good in theory and everyone nods, but actually will anyone use it is the question. So yeah, I think it's a good idea in principle.
Would you use it, Claire?
I think it's a bit like Facebook. Everyone uses Facebook because everyone uses Facebook, and actually not everyone uses Facebook, but so that's probably what it has to achieve, is that it's got use, which encourages use.
Yeah.
Not really answering the question, but
it's all right. Yeah,
I would use it.
Diplomatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like, yeah, I think it's probably. Well, actually, James, you probably want to come back in But oh, go on. I'll let Bob answer first, and then I will bring you back in, James, because I know we had a long conversation about.
Well, it's kind of a question, but I remember there was Roger will probably notice, there was a set of resources which I think Peter Hendy, when he was at TFL, kind of got hold of, and they were put somewhere in some kind of, I mean, my suspicion is that there are lots of studies and resources which have been filed away and everybody's forgotten about. These were ones which Hendy made a bit of a fuss about when he was, just before he left TFL. I don't know if Roger remembers anything about that.
But James, did you want to come back on the users, and then yeah, I might share a bit on that as well.
Yeah, so I suppose when we developed it, the idea is that probably its primary audience would be kind of transport planners and kind of engineers who would be kind of actually going out and developing schemes, and way which we would also then like see, you know, kind of like well, not like secondary users, because I think that kind of belittles it, but it's more like almost like not the primary user is basically people would just, you know, kind of want to make a change in the neighborhood and just want to understand how this actually happens. Now, of course, that's an incredibly wide user persona, and kind of, whereas obviously kind of transport planners and engineers are probably kind of slightly narrow, although obviously there are specialisms, but it's but yeah, I think certainly as we go into the next stage, we will need to do more work on, you know, kind of who these users are and trying to understand their needs better, because as I said, it's just kind of an idea at the moment, which we're looking to develop. But yeah, that's the intention anyway.
That's good stuff. And we'll try and remember what the Peter Hendy one was, Bob. Alex, did you want to come in with a question?
Yeah, basically, I just want to say that on the Cycling Embassy website, we had a go at something similar to this at one point, in the kind of peak of the excitement of the good old days of 2015-16. And I think I got together like 2 sample pages in the end. But one of the things that struck us as part of the difficulty was whenever you tried to apply the kind of standard, well, we need to know how much did it cost? What did it take to kind of come up with this? What did the drawings look like? It got quite difficult, actually, quite quickly. And I think part of the difficulty is whether it's better to find these things at the end or as you go along. But I'm happy to share the kind of links we had to go at this. And I think there was also a stage where the government had a bit of a go at doing little summaries of some schemes, but they were very much driven at one audience. And I think that the trick here is trying to get something that works well. But certainly, you know, what we've done then still is around. It can be shamelessly nicked. And it would be lovely to see something that worked at this idea, because certainly the idea, the need is there regardless. Yeah, so no actual question there, more of an observation, which is horrible for this kind of thing, really. But I think the only thing I'd wonder is just about, in terms of encouraging people, one of the things that we found most difficult on the embassy side was getting good visuals to make it easy to understand. And I think if there's ways of making that systemized or simple, that might be a help. Just helps lift pages and make them easy to do well, like street mix being easy to do or something. But yeah, I will stop rambling.
Yeah, have you thought about that, James, like tying in with like cycle streets and uploading photos and stuff when you're doing it in an easier way?
Not explicitly, no. Yeah, definitely something to take away.
Yeah, I mean, links to designs as well with an overall review is still going to be pretty handy. But yeah, it depends how much of a depository. I'll just share my observations. I used to do and kind of insist on it, like an annual report for the London Cycle Network project, and it's kind of real bane in my life that people don't do annual reports anymore. But it did used to take me and about 6 others about 6 months to get all the information together about the costs and the designs and the why they did it and what the results were for all the schemes. And a couple of 100 schemes each year, but like me, absolute vital information. Now nobody's got that. now, and they're in my garage, all those reports now, but it did all come out, and I've still got the version of it. But it's nice to have that in there. What was how did raised entries go down in the city in 2010? We've got information about that. Who would find it? Now you'd have to speak to me or James or Alex by the sounds of it, or find out Roger Geffing's contacts. I think we can do better about putting all this stuff together. And just to go into the TFL one, I remember when I started at TFL, I said, here's all the documents I've got, I'll share. You've got to share your research now. I want to see it all. And why can't we get it out? And I was chatting to Rachel Aldred about how we could get some of the research that TFL did actually out into the world, so people could look at it. So I think there's a real case for that one, and maybe there is an active Travel England tie-in eventually to this. But my personal background, just to someone, I'm giving you so much to say about it. I know is if it's in the hands of any one body, then it's quite a resource strain on them, and it will come and go. And I've seen other people try to put these stuff together, but when it's in the hands of people, and the kind of Wikipedia idea shows us that, and it's open source, then we could get a rich load of content that actually sticks around and survives us. So they're my observations, James. Nobody want to come back on that? We are going to have a debate, people. We're going to give James what he needs here, because I think this is a super exciting idea, and I've seen lots of people fail at it, but I think it's because it's been tied to organisations doing it fully open and bang into what to say.
So that comes with its own challenges, kind of being open and kind of getting people excited and kind of maintaining that excitement. It's was it even like so Wikipedia just had its lulls in its early days.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, no, it is getting that community together, and really the people that are on this webinar now, really, we're not excited by the idea of sharing it, then I don't know. It's an interesting one. Steve, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, I like you've already branded it, James. So I've got no job here, so I'm slightly detached. But I'll steel myself and leap in. But yeah, given that it's the sort of transport version of the Anarchist Cookbook, I'm engaged and interested. And I years ago, myself and a colleague, Pete Abel, who sometimes is on these calls, we did loads of research into to create the cycling strategy for Greater Manchester. And I'm really conscious that, a bit like some people have said with case studies, we assembled all of the sort of main academic papers that made a massively brilliant case for, particularly the economic and health and wellbeing case for cycling, and a bit for walking. And then all of that research really was just piled into the strategy and then not assembled in any coherent way. So I think certainly for people like me that quite often have to write the case for something like cycling, having somewhere to turn to where all that sort of stuff is assembled. So that wouldn't be sort of top tips on design or schemes or case studies, but actually some of the evidence base for me would be absolutely valuable. And I'm happy to donate. It's a few years old now, but I can start by donating all the stuff that we did.
There we go. We're getting it together. I mean, yeah, TFL put some really good stuff together at the moment on the economic case, but what happens in 5-10 years time when you're trying to find that damn thing? I remember I've got a copy up there, probably Bob and Roger have got it, a 20-year-old cycling strategy for London. It's like, you cannot find that for love nor money anywhere, but it was done and nobody's heard about it. I've got like the feasibility for the first time they tried to do cycle hire in London. Who's got that? Who knows? And I've been trying to dump all these documents somewhere for ages, so it definitely I can help you out there as well.
Yeah, I think I've found the what I was looking for. I've just put it up here. It was dumped. That's not very the word, with the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transportation.
Yes, that,
so
yeah.
I've got the link there. I don't know if people visit that or what's in it at the moment.
Yeah, the kind of knowledge base. I'm a CILT member, chartered member, I should say. But yeah, they've got some really good stuff up there. They tried to get a knowledge base together, and I was talking to them about putting all the cycling files up there that I had and I'd collected over the years as well. So I suggested that to James today to talk to some of the professional bodies. And again, they weren't gung ho for it for a while. And I remember Ben Plowden was was talking at the things and we're trying to do the cycle for them. But again, these things peter out like as resources come and go, but the hands of the people, there are people who are a pain in the arse, but if it's like if we can get them all working together on this and we can start contributing, and it's nice that something lands somewhere safe. So for me, my question for James was, how do we know that our time won't be wasted and it'll all just disappear after a couple of years when everybody runs out of steam on it? That's my question, James.
Well, personally, on kind of a personal level, I'm in it for the long haul. I'm obviously kind of in it to the point where it's actually pretty blooming. Either it's it's a massive success and can't take it on myself anymore, or it's kind of as a failure, because I will be honest, there is that risk of failure, but also so obviously we are looking at kind of what other ways by which this could be supported purely other than volunteer time, because again, just from my experience of actually doing these sorts of things previously, if you just rely purely upon volunteer time or like a company just to host it, and you don't have the building blocks in place to ensure that people who add stuff, they feel engaged, whether or not you can have a group of committed moderators as well. If you don't put in the infrastructure in place, which we're basically going to be doing over the next 3-4 months or so, then it's not going to fail. Then it'll fail. Basically, it's basically we're putting in the groundwork now, and hopefully there will then be a success in the future. Anyway, I'll stop rabbiting.
There's always archives out there as well. You can still get all of the Cycling England stuff from the web archive. So I'll bring Sally Watson. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. I mean, as somebody who's spent many hours trying to find cases and find out more detail about them and find out what's happened elsewhere and what people have been able to do and how they've done it, I think it is a really good idea. I can see that it is that resource issue, but if it is something that people can contribute to and you get a bit of momentum going, it might be something that people want to share things on. But I can also see that it would be useful in terms of teaching, because you've got a new generation of transport planners and engineers coming up, and from my perspective, teaching in architecture and planning, that to have somewhere that you can go to pick out cases and good examples, or to direct students to, would also be really, really useful.
Yeah, it can be laborious finding all these things, can't it?
But great, if you can do it.
Brian, you don't mind me if I can pitch a question out there? Because I think it's probably kind of as an important question as to what's good about it. What do you actually hate about things like Wikipedia? What's the stuff which really almost the pitfalls to avoid, as much as what potential good it can be? It's just kind of throwing out an open question there to everyone.
Yeah, anybody want to take James up on that?
Say again, what was the question?
So what are the pitfalls? What's the issues with stuff like Wikipedia or kind of other places where they try to document everything, try and document everything that's happened, the stuff to avoid, I suppose.
I'll say that the bias, so Wikipedia, you'll know, is very gendered, and so what the choice of what goes into something needs to be looked at. So make sure that's and so I know it's self-selection, but that might still need to be a little bit of encouragement as well. Has to go into that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Tim, go for it.
Yeah, not too much text and quite a few images, and that's what, as an engineer and a designer, I like to see, because I find just if there's Wikipedia, some of them are just so much, it's blocks and blocks of text. So lighten it with some good images. Somebody mentioned Cycling England. I was one of the advisors for that back in the day, and we did a nice little photo library between Adrian Lord, Tony Russell, myself, and some of the other advisors. Just schemes we'd seen which were really good. Of course, now you can just Google it and you get thousands of images, but what are the good ones? So it's sort of finding out the best stuff, which now there's too much information almost. Before there was not enough. So that's the sort of teasing out the good stuff and having some sort of peer review so that you can say that scheme has been, somebody thinks it's good and other people have reviewed it, and the main thing is, has it increased cycling? I mean, that's the question I used to ask local authority officers, and most of them had no idea. They were just designing a scheme, but they had no idea how many people used it. So, you know, that was the sort of issue we had 20 years ago. Hopefully it's a bit better now. But a great idea, I think.
Yeah, good man. I'll bring Mark Strong in, but like what I'm also going to do for you, James, is me and Steve are going to concoct a vote, and we're going to type one in there. I might ask people if they want to be like a community, like a holder of it, or just contribute, or whether they're like they're doing the whatever, or like if someone else does it, maybe I'll benefit. Don't know, kind of camp. We'll put that kind of vote together. But Mark Strong, I know he'll give us time to do this vote while he's doing that. Have you got a comment, Mark?
Yeah, so sorry, I'm dropping in between two other meetings, local meetings. We just had the Brighton Hove City Transport Partnership, and the head of transport said he was just at a meeting with a couple of DFT local transport officials, and they were discussing. He didn't say it was confidential, so I'm going to repeat what he said, which is they were discussing tranche 2. They've pre-selected a range of authorities that they want to give tranche 2 money to. I'm assuming one of them being Brighton Hove, given that he was there. They've agreed, they have to agree to a 5-point plan. He didn't say what the 5-point plan was, but they have to sign up to a 5-point plan. But one of them is much stronger commitment to consultation and engagement. And there was a rumor flying around on Twitter, which Alex Ingram pointed out, that MPs would have a role. And he did, and I thought that was nonsense, but apparently MPs will be formally part of the consultation process. They won't have a veto. Obviously, they don't have a statutory role with local authorities, but they will be obliged to contact and take account of the views of the local MPs, which is a new one. Somebody said I was on that call too. Okay, well then you might know more than me. And that the announcement would be probably the day after tomorrow is what he thought.
Good man, Mark. Sorry, I was typing the votes, but I'm sure it was all good.
Who's Lucy, by the way, that was on that? Lucy said I was on that call. So
yeah, that's me, Mark.
Good to hear your voice, Lucy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I was on that call as well. So yeah, I'm reading between the lines a bit, but there seemed to be concern from ministers. They didn't say this at all. This is my interpretation of there's a renewed emphasis on consultation. So I'm guessing that ministers have sort of become more nervous as a result of lots of publicity about the LTN backlash and concerns about emergency vehicles on protected news cycle routes and that type of thing. So yeah, there's a new focus from the DFT on consulting. So I actually asked a question about experimental orders, because obviously with an experimental order, you've got the consultation concurrently. So what do we do with that? And yeah, what they're wanting is not necessarily consensus to be proved before the scheme, but they are wanting some indication of this silent majority support, ideally, and a clear consultation plan, so that even if you don't have consensus, you're telling the DFT what you are going to do by way of consultation in a clear plan. So it's
reasonable
a bit more legwork.
And as I said, the network management guidance, I think I said this last week, it will come out again. So I helped write CIHT's response to that, and that has specific requirements on consultation, even where consultation isn't statutory required. So putting in a light protection cycle lane, which you don't need to have consultation on, you don't need a TRO. The DFT have said you need to consult on that, even though you don't need to legally.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Dave, did you want to come in with a question? We'll just finish off this bit. Dave, come on, Dave.
Yeah, sorry about that. it's the laptop that is a bit difficult to find the unmute. Yeah, I was thinking, I've tried to find the old TAL, traffic advisory leaflet stuff, that the DFT, when they ran the website, used to be very easy to find. But since everything's gone over to gov.uk, a lot of stuff seems to have disappeared. So I've built up some electronic files on this, and I worked with Cherry Allen at Cycling UK to make sure we got electronic files of a lot of documents. So I think in the Cycling UK sort of library, there should be quite a lot of electronic stuff. And I've also got electronics of some US things, particularly the cycles and public transport document from various US bodies, TRB, Transportation Research Board, US DOT, from the 1990s. So there may be stuff that I've got electronically to feed in, and other resources that could be scanned in. A lot of us have got documentation going back years.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant to get your stuff, Dave. I must admit, like to get your archive somewhere we could all access it. Albeit, you know, can just phone you, but like it'd still be useful to have it out there. Claire, did you want to come back? I will.
Yeah, I just wanted to check my understanding of what Mark and Lucy were sharing, because I'm sorry if I was slightly. So was that basically a meeting to talk about the next tranche of emergency active travel fund? And what you've got there is they're basically going to be, when they announce it, which is probably this week, they're going to announce further guidelines which are more focused on consultation and engagement. I just want to check that's what you explained. Yeah, thanks.
All right, this is exciting now. We're all been up for it. Shall we do a vote? I think Steve's got the technology. Let's give James some to take away some stats to put up on his wiki. See, I'm totally down with the lingo. I haven't put my glasses on now, so can I read it? We won't be doing any recounts. Topical jokes.
Pennsylvania's announced.
These are the jokes.
Time for a press conference outside the Four Seasons Total Landscaping shop, I think.
While
Robert is waving.
Yeah, while Steve's doing his work in his magic, what I didn't mention in the update is that there was a very, 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 very bad report by the World Health Organization supposedly on cyclist safety, which was basically all about have lights and wear helmets. And it really does need a sort of detailed demolishing. I might contact a couple of you who are engineers to see what you think about it. Brian unwisely just nodded a bit there, so you might get something in there.
No, yeah, I wouldn't mind having a run at some of the stuff in there as well.
Yeah.
Particularly roundabouts as a safety measure for cycling. But there's a few iffy bits in there. Yeah. So yeah, let Bob know if you want to contribute to that. Wouldn't mind speaking to them. Quite a big organisation. All right, the votes are in, people. All right, okay. So we got 7% of us. Oh, what's the 77 of us? Oh, so quite a few that actually want to represent whole communities. So you're looking good here. Like we'll put James's details up to get in touch, and 47% of the people here might want to contribute it. Most people, practically everybody, wants to use it, and a few that are just not sure. So I think that's a pretty glowing endorsement of the concept, James, as it goes like a much more successful than other polls we've had to get people going. So I'm certainly super excited. We'll keep a record of that poll for you, but I think you've got people that want to contribute, so get it going. We've all got the link now, and let's chat to James. Do you want to talk about what your next steps are with it, James, to kind of finish off this section? That sounds good.
Yeah, so basically, the next steps are to take the prototype almost towards what's basically called an alpha solution, which is pretty much like the first, like the stage before, like completely ready to go, obviously to come share it with the big wide world, etc., etc. Obviously, in order to do that, obviously we are seeking funding as well, you know, to come help out pay like the few bills which do need paying in order to do that. But obviously not seeking funding from anyone here. And yeah, just like basically recruiting kind of people who almost be like first adopters, you know, people who are kind of really interested, really interested, really kind of signed up to it and say, yeah, I want to be part of it. So yeah, I've already dropped my my email in the chat already. So if people want to drop me an email, you know, just after this session, then yeah, let's chat.